2014 Planning Board meeting. We call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And for a roll call this evening, Mike Caparillo, Chairman.
Tom Young, Vice Chair.
Bob Curtis, member.
Some great alternate.
Absent this evening, Russ Blanchett, Joel Capelson, Mike Croteau, and Kevin Bork. Jason, would you like to be a voting member this evening?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We'll start the evening with public input. If there's any input, members of the public, not related to the application. Okay. Closing public input for now. First item on the agenda, the board will hold a hearing for the acceptance of a completed application by K&M Developers LLC to subdivide one lot into 13 residential lots, map K, lot 9-1. One conventional lot is fronting on Brickyard Drive. The remaining 12 open space development lots are located at the extension of Hamel Circle. So in terms of the application, have abutters been notified?
Yes.
All fees been paid?
Yes.
Russ is here.
Thank you. Jen, we have all documents for the application, and
Thank you.
we have all documents for the application.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any board member have a question on the application?
Checklist, old item number 2.
You want me to accept the application?
No, explain the process.
Okay. This evening, the process, the planning board will first receive information to confirm the application is complete. Then the planning board will second vote to accept the application for consideration, but this does not approve the application. The application will then be considered the merits of the application, and if acceptance, will approve the application or will be extended to a date and time certain. Questions on the application from anyone on the board?
Completeness review.
Vote to accept the application, correct?
Yeah, you want to go through like the checklist just to confirm that it's all complete?
Well, we did already. The impact, she has all fees paid, and butters notified.
Correct. As well as all materials have been submitted.
Yes. That's why I asked about the documents.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
So we're good?
We're good.
So again, this vote does not approve the application, but only places it in front of the planning board for consideration. I'd take a motion on the application.
Completeness.
Somebody accept the second.
I need a formal motion.
Who made the motion?
Hold
Motion
on,
to accept the application.
Jason.
Do I have a
Second.
second? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Tom.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes 5-0-0.
I have a point of order for a second. Because the room air conditioner is running, you have to really speak up tonight because
Okay.
I don't know
In
where-
Oh, for you.
for this tape before I
Okay.
get yours. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Sweating. I never take my sweater off.
Okay. Okay, and the only other vote we have to take at this point is to determine if the application has a regional impact per RSA 36:54-58. I don't believe there's regional impact. Anyone have anything else different to say? I'd take a motion regarding that.
What's the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that this proposed application does not have regional impact.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0-0. Okay, now this portion of the process, we will consider the application for approval and will solicit public input. First, we'd like the applicant to present their plan to the board and the community. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Colburn. I'm a project manager with Keach Nordstrom Associates, and we're the land surveyors and project engineers for this job. We represent K&M Developers, the applicants. And we're here tonight to discuss the plan before you, which contemplates the subdivision of existing map K, lot 9-2. You folks know the property as the property at the end of the existing Hamel Circle, which you heard and approved last year and is now built out. This existing property is about 73 and a half acres in area, and it's situated in the residential zoning district and aquifer protection overlay district. It's separated from the existing Hamel Circle by an existing 170-foot wide public service transmission line easement that runs in an east-west direction. A substantial portion of the existing property is encumbered by jurisdictional wetlands, which you can see on this overview plan. The wetlands are delineated with this dark line here on both sides of the property. For that reason, the applicant is proposing a conservation open space development. As you folks are aware, that section of the Litchfield zoning ordinance allows for reduced lot area, a half-acre residential building lot as opposed to the conventional 1-acre lot requirement. As well, it allows for a reduced frontage for 90 linear feet of frontage as opposed to the traditional 150 feet. So the applicant is taking advantage of that relief from the zoning ordinance and is contemplating 12 open space lots as shown on this plan, along with a 13th conventional lot that will derive access from Brickyard Drive. So we have 12 open space lots and a 13th conventional lot, 1 into 13. Getting into the plan a little bit, the 12 open space lots will derive access from a proposed Hamel Circle extension, we're calling it, basically tying into the existing cul-de-sac at its terminus and running some additional linear footage out to the south into the property. The 13th lot, as I mentioned, off Brickyard Drive. The open space lots on Hamel Circle Extension will enjoy access to Pennachuck Waterworks, but will be served by on-site private septic systems. The lot on Brickyard Drive will be served by private on-site well and septic. The trade-off in the ordinance for relief in lot area and frontage is to dedicate conservation open space. The plan before you tonight dedicates 57 and a half acres in permanent open space, of which 19 and a quarter acres are upland area, and the remaining acreage is the jurisdictional wet that we discussed previously. Although the size of the lots vary from what you're accustomed to, the design of the roadway itself is very traditional. If you go to sheet 10 in the plan set, you'll see the roadway design. Hamel Circle Extension, as I mentioned, is a cul-de-sac street connecting to the existing end of Hamel Circle. It's 24 feet in width with open drainage cross-section. So we've got roadside swales, driveway culverts, and above-ground stormwater management areas. The above-ground stormwater management is dealt with in two locations, primarily for the road runoff. One at the very beginning of the cul-de-sac in this location, and one at the very end. There's a high point at approximate station 600 that diverts stormwater to one or the other of those two stormwater management areas. The roadside swales pick up the water and divert them to these wet ponds. Wet ponds is a definition used by the New Hampshire DES, and basically those ponds maintain a permanent volume that is not supposed to dry up. So you dig the hole deeper than you need it, and you provide for an area that will stay wet. That wet area in the pond provides the stormwater treatment through decomposition and settling time for the pollutants themselves. Both ponds are designed the same way, just one slightly bigger than the other. Then, as to meet the requirements of the DES Alteration of Terrain Bureau, we're required to recharge the groundwater table. When you're in an area with shallow water table like we are here, the DES's concern is separation to seasonal high water. So the wet ponds, that is not a concern because you want those to be dug into the water table. That is the stormwater treatment. In areas where you're looking to actually infiltrate the groundwater, however, you need to provide 3 feet of separation if you're talking about road water, the water running off the road surface. But when you're dealing with cleaner water coming off of the individual house lots, you're only required to have 1 foot of separation. You folks will note that every house in the development is equipped with a shallow infiltration area in the backyard, 50-some feet from the back door of the proposed home. And basically that's an area that will receive stormwater and infiltrate that water back through the sandy subsoil above the groundwater table out here. So that's the stormwater system. On this plan, we do show proposed locations, as we have in the past with you folks, sort of a non-binding lot layout plan that it shows the location of a sort of a standard 2836 colonial with a 2222 attached garage. That's what each of these boxes represents on each of the lots. We showed you how those would relate to the infiltration areas in the backyards, how the front yards will grade toward the roadside swales and be dealt with in the roadside swales. And also where you can see in some of the lots, particularly lot 5, 6, areas where we would propose septic systems in Litchfield. This plan, obviously, as far as the lots, individual lots go, is for illustrative purposes, for your benefit, and obviously non-binding. When the road is built and individual lots are sold to new homeowners, we obviously want to reserve the right to move that house around on the lot within the buildable envelope. But what this shows is sort of the minimum, because each lot will be required to have the infiltration areas in the backyards. I think I alluded to it, but just to make sure you're clear, this plan is subject to state subdivision approval through the DES, as well as the local subdivision approval here. As well, it is subject to alteration of terrain permitting. This project by itself isn't large enough to warrant review by alteration of terrain, but coupled with Hamel Circle, which was built by the same organization just last year, together they exceed the threshold for requiring alteration of terrain permitting and within the time frame necessary. So this project is being reviewed as a single project by the NHDES Alteration of Terrain Program. Both the state subdivision approval and the alteration of terrain approval are pending as of tonight's meeting. And lastly, we require a joint use agreement, which we're working with Public Service for. We're crossing under their transmission easement, so there'll be a joint use agreement between the applicant and Public Service to allow that. That as well is pending as of this evening. So I'm going to turn your attention now to the plan that Tony handed out for me just before I started. We are in receipt of comments from the board's review engineer as well as from the reviewer at NRPC. And we have provided this presentation plan tonight for discussion purposes to show you how we plan to address, I would say, the more major comments received by both Mr. Karen and Ms. Sis. We'll start with the comment from Mr. Karen. He was concerned with the horizontal alignment of the proposed Hamel Circle extension, and specifically the two curves identified as C1 and C2 on the original plan. They're both 150-foot radius curves that are what we call reverse curves, where one transitions into the other. The previous plan that you received shows both of those curves designed with a normal cross slope, like many of your residential streets here in town. Mr. Karen's concern was that that didn't meet the requirements of the AASHTO design guide, and therefore asked us to super elevate both curves to the inside, so that the driver coming around those curves on the outside of the horizontal alignment isn't forced to the road shoulder by the normal cross slope. Now the road is banked in the direction of your drive. This plan shows that grading. Obviously, when we go back and revise plans for the next meeting, we will also revise the profile as necessary in the roadway cross sections. But before we go and do that, we wanted to hear any comments that you folks have. And then the comments from NRPC, many of them benign in nature. The one that we wanted to focus on, or actually the two that we wanted to focus on with this presentation plan, are those relative to the 4K, 4,000 square foot septic reserve areas. Both the state and the town of Litchfield require with a subdivision plan that we reserve an area for septic system installation. The square footage that is required by both entities is 4,000 square feet. A traditional Litchfield septic design system for a lot on this development is probably more in the neighborhood of 330 square feet. So far less area required for a traditional leach field than is reserved by the 4K. Nevertheless, when we laid out the subdivision that you received the first time, we laid out the 4K areas in accordance with NHDES requirements. We failed to acknowledge that the town requires those 4K areas be 100 feet from the wetlands. The DES only requires 75 feet to wetlands. Mrs. commented to that effect, and we have revised the plan as shown to accommodate all of the 4K areas for all 12 open space lots far outside and beyond that 100-foot buffer. You can see that the 4K areas have changed now. Not all of them are regular in shape. Some of them are irregular in shape, which is totally permissible. The other thing that we did was we addressed the concern about the constructability of proposed lot number 7, the last lot on the left side of the cul-de-sac. You can see that I enlarged lot 7 such that the 4K area is located outside of the 100-foot buffer. As well, it shows the house location, the proposed leach field location, and the location of the required backyard infiltration area. I believe this plan addresses her concern regarding the buildability of lot number 7. That required, lot number 7 required that each of the other lots on the east side of the street be shifted to the north and made slightly narrower so that I could make more room for the buildable lot area on lot 7. So in doing so, the frontage for lots 11, 10, and 9 were reduced to 95 feet. Previously they were shown at 100 feet. Reducing those lot frontages to 95 feet is still 5 feet in excess of what's required in the COSD ordinance. However, couple that reduction in frontage with the required 20-foot side yard setbacks, and we're left with a building envelope that is only 55 feet long. And the standard 2836 box that we talked about with a 2222 attached garage is 58 feet across. It doesn't fit anymore within the 95 feet of frontage. What I learned is that when Tony from my office and the applicant came conceptually, they learned of your ability to waive some of the requirements for open space developments in order to reduce that side yard setback. And that's the subject of the request for conditional use permit that Tony handed out before I started. To just summarize that briefly, we're asking for relief. Today, your regulations require 20-foot side yard setbacks. We're asking for relief to cut those in half, make 10-foot side yard setbacks, similar to other communities and their open space development regulations. It really doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to allow the reduced frontage, from 150 down to 90, without also allowing reduced side yard setbacks, because that building envelope's really truncated in order to take advantage of the area and frontage relief that is in the ordinance.
Is that just on lot 7, or is that on all the lots?
We have shown that on all of the lots.
So the
just to be
request is for every lot to be.
That's correct. In the open space, so it wouldn't be for the conventional lot 13, just the 12 open space lots. And only the side yard setbacks. Your regulations already allow relief in the front yard from 50 feet down to 30. So that's really sums up my presentation to you folks and the request for conditional use permit. What we're looking to do tonight is gain application acceptance, which we have. We're looking to gain your input, show you how we address concerns from your review agents, and request to be reheard on the 5th for approval after we've had a chance to update the entire plan set. Thank you.
At this point, we'll take any comments from the planning board or the NRPC circuit rider. I'll start with you, Jen. The side setbacks
Yes,
on every lot?
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I thought it was discussed, it was just for the 7 because of the, unless I misunderstood.
I have to excuse, I wasn't at that one meeting for the conceptual hearing, so I don't have the privilege of having been here firsthand for what the board had discussed. But, and generally speaking, I would say in terms of keeping it consistent across all lots within this particular development, it makes sense to apply that evenly to all lots. Otherwise, you get one neighbor looking at the other neighbor going, well, how come you get less? It keeps things more consistent, more fair within the subdivision, and easier to administer later on when reviewing permits. And also just kind of go to further that in what he was saying about meeting the conditional use permit requirements by reducing the setbacks. He is making it more feasible. It is still keeping within the spirit of the ordinance, and with the large amount of conservation open space land that they're setting aside for the smaller area of development, it goes one step further than we might see from a prospective applicant in meeting that spirit of the ordinance. So I think in terms of making sense for that future homeowner or future lot owner, it makes it so that gives them a little bit more choice in how they lay it out. It also then, for the benefit of the town, allows for more variability for how each site is developed in the future, and not squeezing everybody into that one tiny little, or not tiny, but that smaller space. It's limiting the potential layout patterns. And by allowing for more variability in the potential layout of the house patterns, it creates a more interesting neighborhood.
Any comments from the board regarding that, or questions? Removing the cul-de-sac, the current cul-de-sac, that's not going to be removed completely. It's just going to have the right jog on it going down to the extension.
We're going to remove for the record, Tony Basso with Keach Nordstrom. We're going to remove the paved, some of the paved surface, but the right-of-way has to stay. It was dedicated on the face of a plat, and lots were conveyed based on that. In order to undo that, there would have to be, a request would have to go to the petition, would have to go to the Board of Selectmen to put it on an agenda, town meeting vote would have to go to eliminate this piece because lots were conveyed, and it would leave lots non-conforming because frontage was based on that and stuff. So the right-of-way bubble kind of has to stay for that reason. And because lots were conveyed, it's not something like, I know I've been here myself and we revoked a plan for the purpose of getting rid of but that's because no lots were conveyed, and that worked fine. But where lots are conveyed, the law is pretty specific about it would actually need to go through the discontinuance process, because it wasn't set up as a temporary back then. When Mr. Sousa bought that original thing, he didn't know he was going to be able to get this back, or didn't even know if it was available, or even if it was, whether he'd want it, so it wasn't envisioned so it wasn't set up as temporary, which sometimes you see in phase development, but this wasn't a phase.
But the right-of-way was included in the plans for the original Hill Circle.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
abutters to the right-of-way were notified when they purchased the land that there eventually could be a road going through.
Right, because by the time what happened is he built the road. As he was building the road, then the Alaconis estate let him know that this piece was available. We checked on it, and he decided he was interested in buying it. That's when we came here. He was still building the road. He hadn't conveyed any lots yet. So once he decided to do that, then he had to notify his buyers. They weren't going to be just on a cul-de-sac, which is why they're not here, because they were notified of this meeting via certified mail. So, because they're all those lots, I think everyone is conveyed now. Everyone is conveyed, so he doesn't own any of those anymore.
We have a note here from Jen on the drainage easement submitted into the town council for review. Is that one of the items that's on your list?
Yes, it is. We have to have a lawyer draft the document. And we'll
I know
do
there was
that.
issues with the first Hamel Drive, residents from Ness and Cakes, and the drainage issues they have in that area. Do you feel, I know when the first road went in, residents who lived in the surrounding neighborhood said there's usually a lot of standing water in the area.
Yep.
Is this all being addressed through items that you have in the plan?
Yes, we have
For the runoff.
We have a significant stormwater areas set up for this, and we're handling all the storm requirements for both state and local level for requirements.
How many less lots would you have if you had the traditional side setback?
It wouldn't be a matter of less lots. It would just mean that we'd have a smaller building footprint.
So it'd be smaller homes.
Yeah.
Or no garage,
Garage.
you know.
You'd still keep the same number of lots.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just for point of clarification, the number of lots is set by going through and laying out a conventional subdivision pattern, and that's the yield plan, which I believe is sheet 21 or 22, 21 in the plan set, and that shows how it would be developed. It essentially takes up the entire lot and uses every acre of dry upland. So the result is you get green space in exchange for smaller lots.
Right.
And in terms of, Jen had a comment of open space permanently protected, and legal mechanism to do that protection, obviously, is reviewed by town council. Is that also one of the
Yes,
items
we
to be
actually,
addressed?
we've already coordinated to have that document prepared.
Okay.
Mr. Sousa has done a number of these in the past, and there's a document that he prepares for, it's like a declaration and covenants, and it'll have a restrictive conservation easement over the remaining land, so it can't ever be developed in the future. And it allows for like passive recreation, so non-motorized kind of stuff, and it allows for timber management.
And would that be available at the next meeting? for
Yes,
application?
yes, it will.
One point to the open space. The Fish and Game is going to require that we further restrict the open space beyond what Mr. Sousa even has done in the past, because of the fact that this is a site that has potential for presence of eastern hognose snakes, which is a state endangered species. And so the Fish and Game is going to ask that we restrict the activity to not allow construction of ball fields, parks, anything of the sort. So that'll all be in that document.
Which under a conservation easement wouldn't be allowed anyway. So.
Right.
And then, so the easement for the permanent protection of the open space will be done the next
That
meeting?
would all be part of that.
Common open space. the comment about locations for snow storage and stump and debris removal, was that depicted in the,
No, that'll be in the revised plan.
okay, so that's not addressed yet. A couple punch items, she had, I think the correction items, do you have the list on 14?
Yes, we do have the list.
I'm not, if all these were addressed, the lot 2, the total area of the plan drawings is 39,020, but it's 30,020 on the proposed open space lot table.
So those are the benign items I told you I would fix when
Those
I,
have been
when I
addressed.
do a full scale revision on the plan.
Just for the record. And I see the fire chief, police chief have no issues or comments or concerns, and there will be a fire hydrant and fire suppression there. Mr. Karen, any comments regarding the application?
Yeah, I submitted the letter, which I expect you all have a copy of. Most of the comments are minor cosmetic, which can easily be handled, edits to the plan. The two issues, one they talked about in the beginning, the horizontal curves. My initial reaction was not to simply super elevate them, which does appear to comply. I have to check one other calculation, but rather to reconfigure them so you wouldn't have a super elevation. Because I'm not sure that having a short super elevated curve in a residential neighborhood is that appropriate. So I guess that's still out there. But right now they're proposing the super elevated, which for the curve themselves would comply, but I just want to check how they're transitioning, the rate of transition between the super elevation and coming back into the prior curve. The other
Will it
was,
also be addressed for the next meeting?
That,
Okay.
that's addressed, yeah, I mean, we'll work with Mr. Karen, but that is addressed on this plan even, yes.
and the other was just simply noting that there is a very small section of the roadway which does not have a right-of-way to it on the left side. It crosses private property, which does have a slope and drain easement from the prior project, lot 77-3.
I'm going to clarify, that's an access slope and drain easement, and so what we will do on the next round of revisions is define where the access portion is, which will be right away. So we will clarify that in the next round. It was properly set up, it's just that it's in odd shape, so we'll define the actual access portion, which will become the right-of-way and be dedicated as right-of-way. And we do have the legal documents to do that, it's just, we didn't define it on this plan, we'll define it on the next round, so it's clear where the right-of-way is.
So, Tony, is that a deeded right-of-way or
Yes.
just an easement?
No,
Access
an easement is a right-of-way is, a right-of-way is an easement. Litchfield doesn't take their roads in fee, they're in, they're public servitude, that's what it is. It's if the definition of a right-of-way is an easement. So, it's going to be the exact same thing you used to, it's just, when we did the document, it was a bigger area, we'll just define it as what it truly is, and these will be dedicated in the form that you normally get them.
Is that sufficient, or?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen a road development plan in town in 20 years that didn't have a regular right-of-way.
Well, this will have a regular right-of-way.
Okay.
All rights-of-way are, except in very rare cases, like the F.E. Everett Turnpike, are not owned in fee. They're basically, you call them a right-of-way and we show it as a property line, but actually, it's an easement. And if the road was ever to go away and be discontinued, the owners would own to the center of that, okay? There wouldn't be a strip of land that belongs to nobody there, it would actually go to the center. That's New Hampshire road law, that's the way it works. So it is a right-of-way, it's a right-of-way easement though, that's what they all are, except for major roads like the F.E. Everett, and it's even possible that Albuquerque, because the way it was done, might also be that. But like most roadways in the state are not owned in fee. They are owned as a right-of-way. If they're ever given up, and I'm sure you guys have come across this, when a road is discontinued, the rights go to the center of the road. So that's because the the land, the individual fee underneath actually belongs to all the lots in the simultaneous transaction that occurs when that gets put on record. Okay, so we'll make it clear where the definition of that right of way is. Okay.
Jen?
If I could just recommend that we make sure that that easement that was set in place with Phase 1 be included with the materials that we forward to Town Council, so that they can we include it as part of that comprehensive review of easement language and the have them look at it for consistency or conformity with the road actually being constructed.
Very good. Karen, anything else?
Yeah, everything else was cosmetic.
Right. And we agree to address those comments with him and work with Lou to finish this up.
Jen, any more comments from NRPC?
I do not.
Any board comments, questions? At this point, we'd like to open the meeting to the public. If there are questions and comments should be directed to the planning board chair, and if you come forward, please, thank you very much. Yeah. Please mention your name and address, please.
Margaret Parent, Talent Road, Litchfield, and I'm here to represent the property owners of two pieces of property that abut this development, and it'd be myself and my siblings. And when we first got the registered letter, my husband and I came up and we looked at the plans with Kevin Lynch, and he told us who the developers were. And we made an appointment with Mr. Sousa and saw him and talked to him today, because we have two pieces of property, a 20-acre piece and a 6-acre piece, that we were asking to see about having access or an easement to the property. I know in the past there have been logging roads that ran to our property, so it never had been landlocked. We'd always had use of those roads, but probably in the last 50 years they have not been used. Okay. So we're just trying to make sure that we could have some access to that. When we met with him today, he's going to speak to his engineer and get back to us about possibly doing that for us. Okay. So we just want on record that we were just looking for access or easement to our property.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Joan McKibben for the Litchfield Conservation Commission. Should be noted that there would be wetland buffer markers on the 50-foot line at the wetlands. We have those for purchase for the developer. And I just wondered on the infiltration areas at the back of the lots, will those be deeded in each lot? An easement in each lot, deed?
The areas where yes, they would be maintained by the lot.
But they'll be deeded so that each subsequent owner knows that they shouldn't be filling them in.
We can definitely set some kind of language up like that, yeah.
That's all I have right now.
Thank you. Planning board have any questions on public comments regarding landlocked or conservation issues? Board? Okay. We'll officially close public comment. Thank you for your attendance. Any further questions from the board to the applicant regarding this stage of the plan? And is this something for a site plan walk that we would like to address, or have one? Feeling of the board?
I don't see much need for a sidewalk. Unless other members of the board are interested, I'd be happy to go along.
Pretty well cut and dried.
Okay. At this point, I'm assuming the board would agree to look this to a future date and time. I know we've discussed August 5th as it is the next meeting. I take a motion regarding the next meeting.
Just as a point of order, maybe check, did you want action on the conditional use permit tonight, or wait till the revised plan set is submitted?
I mean, I wouldn't mind a consensus to know that it's okay, so that way we can make that, but it doesn't have to have action tonight. If you
Okay.
want to act on it, it's fine, but if you at least, if we have a consensus that we know we're not making another revision, that would be not a
I
bad.
think at this point, the board has consensus that the conditional use permit would be approved.
I believe so.
Any comments, questions, concerns in that regarding it?
So that's fine with us, as long as
Okay.
we know we don't.
Just
have
wanted to
go
check, yeah.
Come back and not, and have to change all the setbacks, so.
Have a motion regarding the next appointment, we'll put it for August 5th, 2015.
Yeah.
Motion's that, please?
Motion moving forward to August 5th, 2014.
Do you have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes 500.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Let me, just want to double confirm submission deadline. Hold on, I'm gonna, sorry, I should have looked this up because we were, Pat and I were discussing revised plan set deadline, and I didn't look it up. Hold on. Really, yeah. 'Cause we put something in the subdivision and site plan regs just because we had a few applicants that were giving us things the night of the meeting, and how the heck do you review it when you do, when that's the case? So we put something in,
Nuisance are going to be redone for
and we actually had a deadline that we set. And do I remember what it is now? Really quick, where is it? Procedures, should be just right in there. Design review,
It's my house for sale in a month. Yeah.
completed preliminary application filing.
Deed will say access is okay for John.
Oof.
Patrick said that. He agreed.
We said revised plans 15 days prior. That's almost, that's that's like, that's now. In terms of feasibility for myself, okay, I'll be out of, that's fine, I'll be out of the office actually Thursday through next Wednesday, so it won't I won't even touch it to that last week of August, so I'd probably,
That's in July.
last week of July. Oh, God.
So if we got it in for you for Wednesday, you'd be fine.
That's fine,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds good.
And then can you ship one right to Lou, so?
Yeah. As I say, you can, if it's easier, just send us electronic to Lou, myself, and then hard
Well, Lou
copy
might
to
need a
follow.
hard copy,
Yeah, we'll
and
get
then-
Lou a hard
and
Yeah.
then we can get an electronic.
Yeah.
And a lot of loose stuff we already did.
But yeah, I know, so, it's fine. Okay, thank you.
Talk to him
Thank you.
about that road, though.
I know he doesn't agree, but
Yeah.
I'm right.
We have a little time
Okay.
before the 8 o'clock hour. I just want to jump to the minutes from the June 3rd meeting, get those out of the way. The May 6th meeting has been done, so that's been approved.
Yeah, missing, absent,
You're nothing?
nothing.
You were absent on the
I
3rd?
think I
He
was,
was absent.
You were absent. So if you could put Bob Curtis as absent on the June 3rd, 2014 minutes?
Oh,
Yep. Any other comments on those minutes?
was I there?
Let's see, nothing stands out.
Give Russ only 3 year. Motion for the minutes?
Make a motion to accept the minutes for June 3rd, 2014.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
abstained.
Passes 302.
Do you have a copy, Dan, of your report?
Yep.
You have a copy?
Of which?
Your report?
This?
You need this.
And in terms of the Moose Hollow update, I believe a meeting was held with Mr. Lynch, the developer.
And they plan to proceed to end of July or August. They did find the two covered up drains
Okay.
in the old section of Moose Hollow, and they plan to take the cul-de-sac out and pave the whole thing.
Okay.
By when?
I think the latest, the middle of August.
For completion date or for, is it,
End of July. We had the meeting with Lou and Kevin and
Okay.
Jack. So I think that they want to start like the end of July or beginning of August.
and then what's their estimated duration to complete?
It should only take a day, Lou said, to pave,
And the bond expires when?
end of August.
End of August?
So
And obviously they're aware of that and they're aware of,
see some action out there by the end of July.
since we don't have a meeting again until August 5th, can we make an action item for someone to make sure something happens before then? Thank you. And jumping down to number 4, the Larry escrow account, map 9, lot 1.
I don't know that.
Not sure what that's referenced to.
Lou took a look at it tonight, and I would prefer
Revised.
that he writes up a little better. There are some, couple minor things they need to fix. So I don't know if you want to wait till August 5th till I get the letter and see what the bill is for that, and then deduct that from the escrow.
Is that the small subdivision from last year, that one house that was built? The two lots?
Right,
split
down
up? Yep.
on 3A.
Okay.
So do
That's
you-
fine. I think once we have something more formal, and we can
Okay.
address it next time.
Okay.
Is it time sensitive to be done before then?
No, Mr. Leary's been asking several times about the refund. I did send him complete documentation of what has been spent in all of Lou's bills. I just sent that.
Okay.
That on for August.
Just before Mr. Mayberry comes, Jen, any comments regarding the public input from Mr. Parent regarding the access points? Are we aware of how it will be laid out on, or is this new to you this evening?
Yeah, that was new to me.
That was what?
Yes, that was new.
That was new to you,
Yeah.
okay. And that should be, are you aware of where these are even on the map?
No,
No, okay, in mind.
no,
Okay.
I'll follow up and make sure
So
you
that
get
should
more
be an action
information.
item before anything's approved, obviously, is to make sure those are addressed so she's not landlocked.
Right, yeah, that'd be something to, you make sure you want to follow up with them when they submit their revised plan set at the next meeting.
The 10 minutes we have before we start impact fees, Jen, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about further business or any other items?
I'll give that the first agenda.
No, I mean, did everyone have a chance to read through the revised report sent out by Mr. Mayberry? It is pretty dense,
41 pages.
41 pages. Dense. Yes.
Well, on that, it's probably 85 pages.
I do have one spare hard copy of it if you want.
It's the last PDF file on.
Perfect timing.
Hello.
There you go. Yes, it is. If you're on the impact feed page, it is the last document posted on the stack of documents at the bottom of the page.
Your report?
Yes.
There's a link right there.
Yes.
It's broken. Yeah. You gotta go all the way down to the list, and at the bottom of the list, you'll find
That's
it.
the
Do you
last.
need a hard copy? Mm-hmm. Okay. Here you
Those links are
go.
always
Here's a
broken.
complete
When was
set
that,
of
when was that email?
From Bruce?
When?
Ooh. When did you email that? The 7th? July 7th? Yeah, right around there. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I posted it to the Google site
41 pages.
immediately because I didn't want to forget and let it get buried in the inbox.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. We're all ready for you.
It's
I had
uncanny.
a schedule, right?
I've never seen that happen before. Usually if there's a public hearing.
I probably talked too quickly, so thank you for coming back this evening.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
For the record, it's Bruce Mayberry, BCM Planning. This is just to go over some of the changes in the report, some of which we discussed, I think, at the last meeting. There were a few questions on, especially Brian Cochran had come in from the school district to talk a little bit about the changes in capacity in the school system given new state and federal requirements. And I had a chance to meet with the principal of Griffin Memorial and had some emails with Brian. So we went through room by room pretty much and tried to replicate the capacity estimates based on classrooms at Griffin. So I think we arrived at a consensus number there. The middle school, I also took another look at the classrooms there. Some of those original rooms have been dedicated for some other special purposes over time. They've added portables. So we came up with a slightly different figure on that, but I think we're, at least in talking with the school district, we're on the same page in terms of the capacity estimates. So that was one thing that was sort of hanging at the last meeting. Are they appropriate to quote as current capacity? So I think right now we have something that's consistent with what the district would agree with. The second thing, I'm looking at my memo of July 7th.
Okay, so you're on the memo.
Just a summary. The other question was the board favored the square foot fee for the school impact fee. At the time, there seemed to be the consensus. And the question at that time was this difference between what the assessments record calls effective area and the actual living area of the unit or habitable area. So when the building inspector assesses the amount, they want something that's related to the habitable area or livable area. So I did a lookup, sort of a manual sample of 10% of the single-family homes in town and virtually 100% of the other structure types. The only way to do this is to go into each record manually and take a look at it because they're all in different fields in terms of what's actual living area of the unit. So what this reflects is basically living area above grade space. Came up with some ratios and I was able to adjust all the numbers that we had in there originally from effective area into living area. So the square foot rate goes up a bit from what you saw because now we're dealing with slightly smaller square footage reflecting actual living area and not the effective area, which is a combination of parts of the basement space, parts of attics, and parts of other space that's not habitable. So what you see in this new report are square foot rates that would be consistent with living area. So you wouldn't have to do any more adjustments on that. You could go straight to that table and that would be appropriate for a square foot fee. Third question, I think, on the school fee was a cap on the amount of square footage assessed. I usually recommend that because at a certain point, when the homes get very large, at some point there's really no more enrollment you get out of that house. And I think I've recommended around 2,500 square feet sort of be the cap. I think that when I looked at the enrollment numbers, that relationship starts to break down between there and 2,750, 3,000. And I think you want your top fee not to be too much higher than what a 4-bedroom house would be, for example. So I think a maximum of 2,500, even 2,000 would work effectively. I think it's a board decision. You can look at depending on the method you choose, take the square foot rate times X square feet and see how that feels. If you reach a maximum at something lower than that, that would certainly be another way to go. If you simply feel that at a certain point, if it turns out to be $6,000 or $7,000, for example, and your gut feel says that's too high, you might want to truncate that at a different maximum square footage. But I think anything up to 2,500 would certainly be consistent with the method. Another question has been whether to retain the elementary school within the calculations at all. And I think the more I've looked at it, now I found the capacity really is not there. There is not a surplus. If you went back to the original capacity estimates and you'd added on the portables, you'd probably have a surplus. But because a lot of that classroom space has been appropriated for other special uses, that much classroom capacity isn't really available. And in fact, the district, it's not even meeting the district's own standards for maximum pupils per classroom. So that's a difficult fit, I think, for us to basically have the capital basis of the fee rest on the school. And given the long history there and attempts plans to expand or build a new school haven't gone forward, my recommendation would not to include that, at least in the capital basis of the fee, because of that history.
So a question on that, and maybe it's understanding where that comes from, but if you look at impact fees, it's due to growth of the town, the incremental surge in the schools, but if that's the one school of the three that would need the help to just have increased size of what it is now, and that's the first school you hit as a child, wouldn't it make more sense to have the impact fee in elementary school for any future potential building? Because that's where it was going to be felt first, as opposed to the high school, which once the bond's paid off next year, there shouldn't be any impact fees collected on that.
I think the problem with the elementary school is that right now, it doesn't meet its own standards for the existing student population. So it's really in deficiency, and it's been in deficiency for some time. So to charge an impact fee based on that, and then to apply it to the school, would really be paying for a deficiency and not for, if it had surplus capacity, I would agree with you, we'd have them all in there, and it would make sense to have all of them in there, as was the original intent. But it's had a history of trials and failures to go forward with expanding it or to replace it, and I think a long documentation of substantial other deficiencies, not related to space, but just the quality of the space, that go back so far that I'm just reluctant to recommend it. I've set up the fee table so you could do that if you wanted to, if you thought that something was imminent that was going to make improvements there.
But it's not necessarily used for improvement to the existing schools to build a new school. So at some time in the future, a new school 20 years from now is built.
Right.
I know impact fees collected now would be obviously returned way before then because they weren't used. But if it's only used for the building of a new school, why stop having the money? Because that's where it's going to be used first as a town.
Well, I think that you could continue to collect the fees and continue to refund part of it, I suppose. That would be one way to go, is just continue to collect it and bleed off the elementary portion if nothing changes. I think that you can probably have because our discussion last time was pretty much that you're in a situation now where at least the middle school and the high school have some excess capacity. We can demonstrate that there's, even if enrollment growth were to take place, which it may or may not, any new development drawing down on that capacity is then paying in to offset its impact on, say, consumption of that space. But in the elementary school situation, my concern there is that it's not meeting its own stated standards, and therefore, how do we base an impact fee on that and ask new development to pay for something that the town has not been willing to fund? It's kind of an impasse to me.
But new development's only going to pay for it if it passes.
Well, it depends. If you'd be in a constant cycle of refunds, that's the only issue there.
No,
We are now.
Yeah.
It's not really a desirable place to be.
So you're making people pay this that they don't have to pay because nothing's being done with it. You're putting a burden on somebody to pay this for something that you're just going to return.
And it gets returned to the original developer, not to the current property
Right.
owner. So the current property owner who bought the house with that cost built into it never sees any benefit in either increased school capacity or a refund in their pocket.
I think when I did the first draft, I had used some of the 2002 capacity numbers. And when I first approached the school district, they didn't have, revised actual capacity numbers. And then, so at that point, I said, well, it appears if you went to the maximum capacity, there's room there. But because of the changes in special ed and some other different educational requirements over time, then there's capacity there, but it's not enough to meet even existing demands. If there were an imminent proposal, to build a new school or another proposal to rebuild or expand, then certainly that would be something to pin your fee on and say, well, it's coming, it's almost here,
Right.
or it'll be up for another bond vote. So, again, I think that's a choice the board would have to make as to whether to continue, and I've calculated it both ways. If you wanted to keep the entire capital basis in there, you could do that, and then perhaps refund for the elementary school portion if nothing occurs within the 6-year time frame. That would be one way to go. The other would be to collect a smaller amount of money based on the middle school and high school capacities only. And since it's a recoupment fee, you could probably use those funds for whatever improvements in the school system. I don't think it would be tied to any particular school necessarily, but if there were capital improvements to be done, since it's a recoupment fee, you could probably apply that to almost any capital improvement in the
Like-
district.
Capitalism, what
Sorry.
kind of capital are we talking about?
Well, I think we're talking about long-term, something with a long useful life, 15-year useful life, something like that.
Boiler?
Pardon?
A boiler?
A boiler, perhaps.
All I'm saying is,
Yeah.
because the way I read it, it's not for repair or replacement of,
Right.
of equipment.
Right,
It's more for capitalism, real estate capital is how I read it, but maybe I'm wrong.
right. Yeah,
You just
it's,
go willy-nilly say I'm replacing all the air conditioning with impact fees.
right, right. I mean, you'd prefer not to do that, obviously. But the statute talks about, using the funds for the purpose for which they were collected, or to recoup the cost of capital improvements made in anticipation of development. So given that or,
Right, but that's the point is,
You could recoup.
and I guess that's why I'm trying to get it
Yeah.
straight, is recoupment in anticipation of demand, right?
yeah,
So that type of capital improvement, like I just said with boiler, is not in anticipation of demand, it just,
right, but it was part of the capital basis that went into constructing, providing the school. I think that if there were capital improvements that the district had that were going to improve certainly the quality of the space and the educational.
well, and that's the next
Space,
question
yeah.
is, say, development of, because I know they've really expanded they say the athletics, right? They do different things, and let's say they're doing a ball field,
Yeah,
right? Recoupment of capital,
right.
expansion of the ball fields, let's say, because they have a bigger program, or right? Is that what we're talking about?
I think it's a possibility. I mean, the
Like
statute
lacrosse is
doesn't
big,
really.
so they're bringing lacrosse in. Maybe it's for
Right.
lacrosse field.
Right. I mean, it would be great to keep it within the building, because our whole fee basis is based on the building.
That's why I'm asking. Right.
And that would be preferable. But I mean, the statute doesn't really, I don't see it putting a limit. When it talks about recoupment, you're in a recovery of.
Oh, storage. Let's say storage. So these buildings weren't made for storage, and all this expansion
Right.
of different co-curriculars and different things that are going on, where they build onto, let's say, the high school for storage because they've just outgrown the confines.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Again, if
No, they haven't yet.
Well, a couple years ago, there's a storage facility, and I thought the discussion was impact fees cannot be used for a storage facility.
Yeah, I know, there's some different ideologies, that's why, there's different nuances that have been,
right.
that's why I'm probing the edges.
So does the definition need to be firmer in the statute itself, or is it more of just how it's applied?
I think it's how it's applied, because what's unclear in the statute, it allows you to do recoupment,
Yep.
but it doesn't tell you exactly how that can be spent. It tells you that impact fees, it has to be obviously in the same category. A school fee has to stay within the schools. If it's recoupment, it's essentially clawing back funds to pay for something that's already been built and
Yeah.
mostly paid for. So then the question is, how do you apply those funds? And I don't think the statute's very clear on what you can do with that in a recoupment situation. If right now if all the schools were in deficiency and you had no capacity and no plans for improvement, I'd say, don't do that. You'd have to hold those funds until you do some expansion, because otherwise you wouldn't have space to accommodate any additional development.
State your name for the record.
Kevin Lynch, 312 Charles Bancroft Road, not as a building official, but as a citizen. Going back to the impact fee question, Jason brought up a point where capital, okay, like expansion for a need. The school has grown and there's another need because other needs are going in.
Right.
That's something we're looking at in the school. Well, everybody's looking at that. But let's say if we got a building that's has some allergy issues, I'll say that, or we got an old ventilation or no ventilation, and it's in an area where we can improve the building. It's a capital improvement on that building that's different than what's there. Could an impact fee be associated with that as well? That type of improvement to make the quality in the building better?
Yeah, I think we can. In a recoupment situation, again, it's assuming the capacity is already there, the basic capacity is there, covering funds.
GMS.
GMS,
That's
yeah.
what he's talking about, is GMS.
Yeah, I think we probably could.
Well, ventilation issue is a permanent answer. You don't redo it once it's corrected. So isn't that the gist of a capital expense is one that's a permanent solution?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
So-
I mean, I think some people draw the line and say if it's a 15-year useful life, you know, that
Yeah.
there's no
That would happen.
hard and fast rule, but
That's why you're in the heat tonight and here over 15 years. That air conditioner went down.
I think it's something that I haven't seen it. There's been no litigation on that subject. I think that the New Hampshire statute seems pretty wide open to me. We're kind of doing the same thing with roads, basically. Roads are really recovering money that you would be spending on a rolling basis and recovering part of that through an impact fee. But
So
again,
items like Mr. Goret mentioned are items that are not necessarily on the fringe. They're not questionable. It's not building a building or expanding a new school, but it's something that is a capital expense that would have a useful life that would affect the school for
well, it
50.
affects the long-term quality of
Of
the
the-
educational facilities. So
Then that's
I think that would be sufficient rationale, provided, you know, the capacity is there, it's being paid for, it has been paid for.
yep.
It's, if we started from scratch and we said, well, let's just charge an impact fee for improving the ventilation system, I'd say, no, that doesn't really wash, because who are you gonna charge it to? You'd charge a little bit to new development, a little bit to
Yep.
the existing, and it would all proportion out somehow. But that's based on kind of the theory of the impact fee that I put forth in the beginning of the report. If the recoupment theory doesn't make sense to you, none of the rest of this will either,
Yep.
in terms of the
Well,
schools.
it's a difficult concept to grasp, because an impact fee is because someone has built into a system,
Right,
and that impact is quantified.
yeah.
And so, the resultant impact on that system is what you're trying to recoup. And so a ventilation system, to me, is hard to understand as far as recoup, because it's there regardless, right? It's not, has anything, there's nothing about what happened with the growth of our town that impacted that ventilation system other than it's old and failing.
Yeah.
And
Or that
that's,
or that it's part of the total investment you need to accommodate development at all.
well, if there was no development or more development,
You still have to do it.
it's still there. So that's why I'm saying it's hard for me to rationalize impact fees, because, you know, that's why you're assessing them, because they're going to have impact on what we have. So if we use GMS as the example, 5 more people showing up in our school is going to have zero impact on the ventilation system.
If I could offer one perspective of trying to think about it and rationalize it, think about it as that improvement is an improvement that's going to be enjoyed by current and future residents of the town. And the current residents have already paid in essentially their dues through their property taxes, but those future residents haven't yet. But they're going to have the benefit of that improved air quality in the school, and perhaps even that ventilation system. They get in there and they look at it and go, it's undersized. It doesn't meet, the needs or the capacity for a greater volume of people occupying the building. And so then the system gets sized up. And so that's another piece of it that might kind of directly relate to that future population. So there's the two pieces to think about it. That is a much easier scenario to see.
That's much easier to see in that.
But think about it in terms of like paying your dues. That system's being used by current people and future people. The current people have already paid. The future people haven't yet.
I understand that. I'm
That's
just,
it.
I'm just,
Just
not
trying
sure
to-
if that is what the intent was, is my point of the statute. Is
Yeah.
that some future people pay because you didn't pay when you moved in. I'm not sure that's necessarily the point of the statute. It's, you have impact.
Yep.
We need bigger school.
Yep.
It helps build additions and, those kind of things.
Population
Yeah.
impact is different in relation to mechanical or running impact other infrastructure.
Yeah.
We have the energy codes that are changing so much. The buildings are 1930, 1948, 1957, 1971. All these energy laws, and these buildings are not efficient. Okay, so that impact now is, we're gonna look at that.
But it's not the impact of the people that moved in, it's the impact of the community.
It's an impact to the community as a whole.
Right, on the tax rate, not on an impact fee. So if a school needs to be upgraded because it needs to be upgraded, that's a tax on ourselves because we need to maintain our schools. It's not the fault of 12 people that moved into town.
No.
You know, and why?
Correct, I agree with that. So,
yeah.
That's what you see, I think.
What it's trying to do is balance or equalize things over time. In other words, if you've had a house here for 25 years and you've paid on bond issues that have built a couple of schools and they're all paid off, new development comes in, gets to use the same schools for nothing, then the impact fee is trying to rectify, is saying there's an imbalance there and we're trying to rectify.
That's what you do when you look for a place to live. Everything's paid for. So that's what
right.
you do.
You don't go where there's a new school.
That's
you go where
right.
there's no school.
So I mean, it's looking at it, I guess it's looking at it from a consumption standpoint. I think that when I've looked at fees, fees for schools are very different, especially in current environment. I mean, the other way would simply be to say we don't need a school impact fee anymore, we don't want it anymore, and that's perfectly okay too. If the board decides it's had its usefulness and that day is over, then rescinding it is another way to go. I would agree with you, probably the original intent of the statute was at a time when we'd just gone through a big period. In fact, when we were going through the most growth, the bill wasn't accepted. There was too much growth and too much development going on, and the legislature wouldn't pass it. It was only when there was a lull and the development stopped that they passed the impact fee.
See, and I view it as it's easy to pass a tax off to someone who doesn't exist yet. You know what I'm saying? And that to me is what you're doing is you're going, yeah, let's just tax these people who don't exist and they got no choice in the matter. You know, versus this is what it takes to manage our community, and folks, we need to step up to the plate.
Another probably bad analogy is what's been done for many, many years in water and sewer systems. The public water and sewer have had capital improvement contributions or system development charges forever, long before there were impact fees. And that money is that money is based on their consumption of the available facilities and capacity and the piping and the treatment plant capacity and all that. They roll all that up and come up with a dollar amount equivalent to what that will consume as a portion of the whole. And that just gets charged, and that money often goes anywhere in the system. I mean, it's of the same ilk as an impact fee, it's just called something different. And to me, that's almost an equivalent in a sense. Your business fee, you may or may not have, the newest, the next 12 people are not going to push you to another treatment level or to expand the treatment plant. You're going to use what's there. You're going to consume part of what's available, and so the charge represents your contribution to that. And again, it's much a matter of local policy. I think in most places I would say there's never been a need for an impact fee. It's always been a choice. You can fund everything off the tax rate and say that that's the most fair way to do it, despite all of the imperfections of ad valorem taxation. We accept that, and that's how we're going to fund everything. So that's another way to look at it. I'm coming at it from the standpoint of I don't think it's prohibited certainly by the statute, and it seems that if you have a consistent approach to it that recognizes the current standards, I would think that would be okay. The problem is if the facilities aren't being provided and are way substandard and not consistent with the standards you set for it, then there's an imbalance, because then you're charging new development for something that you're not willing to pay for, that the existing taxpayers aren't willing to do. Then it becomes, I think, an unfair charge, because now we're saying new development, we want you to pay at this standard. We're going to maintain our facilities down here, though.
That's what's happening.
That's not where you want to be.
That's what's happening.
So again, that's something you could spend a couple of meetings on your own debating whether it should or should not, be. But the other wrinkle, of course, in schools is declining enrollment, and that makes it even more difficult, I think, to see where's the connection? But as you know, when we looked at houses by the year they were built in the original study and the enrollment ratios, the newer homes are where higher levels of enrollment are per unit. So it's not that new development doesn't cause any enrollment. It's just as much a part of contribution to enrollment as any other housing unit would be. It's a part of the whole. So that's the basic approach there. I'll leave you the hard part. I mean, probably the calculations maybe they seem complex, but maybe that's the easy part. I think the policy stuff maybe is more difficult to fathom. Can I move to the road one, or do you want to spend some
Questions
time
on schools? Thank you.
on the road fee? There were a couple things there. I think we went back, took another look at the cost basis. I've increased that a little bit based on a standard Class 5 road model that I had done a few years ago by Wright Pierce Engineering, and updated some of the baseline costs in that. So what we're doing in the lane mile model is taking the basic approach you're using now, but we're, instead of basing it on constructing a road from scratch, from bare earth, we're talking about replicating what the town's road improvement plan is likely to be, which is generally going to be reclamation and repaving of the roadway surface and drainage. So if you were to keep going on the way you've been doing it in the past, you'd have an impact fee for roads probably several times higher than what I'm suggesting in this. But what I've been suggesting in here is that the level of the fee ought to be commensurate with what the town's capital investment is, just as we did with the schools. So the lane mile model is, just to refresh you, is basically saying, a given number of trips will consume how much pavement area to provide the lane capacity of a standard Class 5 road to carry a certain number of cars. So that's basically, it's an existing road. It's going to require reclamation and improvement periodically. The town has been doing that. It had the old RSMS system done in 2002. And so that's one way of looking at it, is a simple lane mile model. It's comparable to what you have today. I introduced a couple other things that I call a trip growth model. These came out of a study done by Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission years ago in an impact fee handbook. And in these we're saying that the town would spend X number of dollars per year over a 20-year period. How much trip growth would there be in that period? Compare that to the baseline and allocate a certain percentage to new development. And the growth, so basically we're taking that portion that we can attribute to new trips and recovering that from new development. One of the questions asked at that time was that the current improvement budget would be half funded by the town's highway block grant. And the question was, do we need to, can we base the fee on the whole dollar amount, or do we have to take 50% off because it's being done with highway block grants? So I discussed it with Jason, and I looked back at some guidance documents from local government center. And I think, we concluded that the block grants, while they have to be used for highway department expenses, are not exclusively related necessarily to road construction. That's certainly one of the intents, but it's not what I call a dedicated revenue. In other words, you would not have to use that entire budget for this road improvement program. In fact, it appears you could be buying road equipment, you could be doing winter and summer maintenance, you could be buying salt and sand, and so forth. So I think, unlike the schools where we look at state building aid, the only way to use state building aid on a school is if that building aid is dedicated to that project and that specific project. On the highway block grant, it's a general block grant to the community that gives you discretion in how to spend it within the highway budget. That's how we've looked at it. The alternative to that would be to discount the whole thing by about 50%, which I think would leave you with a fee that's a little anemic in terms of trying to do anything with it, because we're talking about something on the order of $1,500 for a single-family home. But that was my feeling in discussing with Jason and looking at that particular case, it is being applied to roads, but being applied to the road reconstruction program, but it seems more of not a specifically dedicated revenue, but a general revenue that could be used in the highway department. I had a few other, I won't go into these, I sent you a few comments on the last draft of the impact fee ordinance. There, nothing really major there, but just a few things in terms of the amount assessed, fix at the subdivision period. And so there's some other, we can go into those if you had any questions about my comments. I don't want to belabor that too much. I know you've spent a lot of time on the ordinance. I've already harped on the refunds and the property owner of record at length. I continue to do so. I will continue to do so as long as I'm working on impact fees, because I think that was, again, it seems like the only fair approach to me is to give the consumer a little protection in the ordinance. Otherwise, they may never know. In fact, the Londonderry Superior Court case actually left that avenue open. If the homeowner can prove that they paid those fees as part of their construction contract, then they're due the refund. So there's, even in that case, which was an odd one, because the town didn't really defend its own position. It's an odd.
That could open up some litigation, even after the fact, because
yeah.
the refunds like a question going back to the building.
What's that?
The refunds that we've had in return are going back to the building.
Right.
And that's a gray area.
Town council advising us to go back to the builder, correct?
Correct. Previous town council and current town council have both given you the same advice.
Because now that happened, that was just recent. I mean, that affected our decision. Now
Asking about Londonderry specifically, I don't think we specifically pointed to that case. However, the most recent advice from council saying it goes back to the builder has been very recent. It was just in the last round of comments.
Already got settled. So now there's a precedent to another town.
Right, and so.
Well, Londonderry isn't really precedent setting because it's a Superior Court case. It didn't go to the Supreme Court, so it's out there for a review. But
right.
My limited knowledge of that was that the town did not try to defend its ordinance, which required refunds to owners of record. They did not pursue that. It simply said.
So they were delinquent.
They simply said, we may be inconsistent with the state statute. What do you think? So,
it's a little different.
with the result as, you know, I think there's a difficulty with understanding what impact fees are and how they're paid and what their purpose is, because if an impact fee was simply a license to do business in town, I would agree, you know, then obviously that builder or developer needs to get the fee back if something didn't happen. But because it's being paid in for the impacts of occupancy or use of a land use, and I think in some cases it's might be difficult to document who paid what in the final settlement of any contract. It seemed to me that the states that have mandated that are kind of on the right side of it in my mind. That it certainly simplifies things for towns, because the rule of law usually is everybody's aware of the law, you act accordingly, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. So if everybody knows what the deal is up the front, everybody would write their contracts knowing where the refunds would go. So I don't want to, I said I didn't want to belabor
that's
that,
fine.
I guess I did.
Jen, are any board comments on the impact fee ordinance revised June 19th comments, as long as Mary's here? I haven't had a chance to read those.
I didn't have any more questions, but what I did take is simultaneous to your review, council also reviewed the ordinance. Jason Hoke had forwarded it to council for review. So I've merged Mr. Mayberry's comments in with council's comments in that draft. So when you're ready to look through those, they're available.
So I think probably what's left on this, this phase of the study, I did did see some typos and formatting things I'd like to fix in the final. If it came out that way, I don't know, but I just switched over to Windows 8.1 and the new Word suite, so I became entirely confused right about in the middle of this final draft. So I'm still struggling a little bit against the Microsoft empire. But I'll get that to you in a couple days.
Okay.
Any changes. So I guess what would be left for the board was your policy review in terms of whether to obviously retain the fees or not, whether to discount them at all. That was an option I put forth in the school fee, to consider a discounted fee and a fee based on part of the capital facilities. In other words, the capital basis perhaps being for the middle school and high school facilities, as that basis would make it a little smaller. I think you'd opted for talking about the square foot fee. The road fee, I've given you a square foot alternative there as well, in case you wanted to use a square foot basis for that. Although you don't have to, it might be more straightforward to use the alternative. And then the other, so the issues would be the discount, the method of assessment, and then the square footage on the school fee, the maximum subject to a school fee assessment would be also another policy that you could set in your regulations about how much of that to. And I think our next phase would be to move to the second phase of the study. I did get a little belatedly, I learned that the purchase order had been issued about a month ago for the second phase, but I hadn't received it due to email difference in email address. So I just learned about that last week. So we can get going on that pretty soon. I'll be on vacation next week, but soon thereafter I'll set up some meetings and we can push forward on that one. Hopefully a little quicker than this one. Went a little bit slower than I was expecting.
Good prep. Anything else? Comments, questions? Thank you very much.
If there's anything else, email, and otherwise I'll try to move on to the next phase as soon as I can and get some traction on that part of it. I think we may face some of the same issues in terms of capacity and growth and whether the facilities are being expanded.
Yes. Oh, not in here?
And I can
In the
show you
They
that.
want to be consistent between the two. I assume.
There's been, while I'm here, has there been any update of a recreation plan or anything that's newer than the master plan in terms of recreation inventory or?
Nothing.
Inventory, yeah. Well, there's new fields.
Okay.
There's a new set of fields, Litchfield Park, Sawmill. That's the only thing that's been built. I mean, some have been rehabbed a little bit.
Okay.
Nothing besides that.
Okay. I just wanted to see if there was an existing inventory already out there somewhere.
That would be
else.
the one that would be missing. That was opened 2 years ago.
Okay. That looks like it's getting a lot of use too.
It's always busy. Soccer, lacrosse, everything.
I'll catch up with the different departments and get that baseline laid down.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good evening.
Look at the ordinance, there is a waiver piece in there.
Bruce, do you have a new
I
business
gotta pay
card
attention to go
with
over
you?
here.
You can?
So just to kind of reiterate, so prepping for the next phase, we should be thinking about what studies or needs analyses already exist and are available, and trying to collect those and get those over to Mr. Mayberry. And he'll also touch base with different staff in town to follow up and see what there is as well. So there's some general notes of kind of considerations that we need to start thinking about for phase 2 that are on the Google site.
Thank you so much.
And we could add that to August 5th with the approval or the discussion of the Hamel extension.
Yeah.
Because we have to have all this done by when? The impact fees done for ballot, like the posting of the ballot in
Yeah, first hearing would have to be in December.
December.
But technically in August, you're supposed to start doing your impact fee review for the Board of Selectmen. So what we'll want to do is, I think in August, we'll do an initial letter to the selectmen that updates them on progress, where we're at, and planned schedule to complete the methodology and have a hearing on the updated methodologies. So want to kind of schedule that out as well.
You don't need to change the ordinance to affect the fees. Or you're changing the ordinance?
We're changing the ordinance
That's right,
anyway.
you do the whole redraft.
Yeah, to clean it up, bring it up to date. And
That looked good. I think consolidated is a good idea.
yeah, having two separate was not intuitive.
Great,
All right,
thank you.
Thanks much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other business? We have rewording of section 510, plat standards in the subdivision regulation, and section 151, submission for home occupation.
Yeah, we need to, Jen and I need to talk about that first, and then we'll bring it in.
What was that?
Jen and I need to talk about that first, and then we'll bring
Okay.
it in. It's
Table
about the
that.
number of copies that, like,
Yeah.
That was a 6-copy.
yeah, Hammer, we
Right.
didn't need 6 copies of the alteration of terrain permit. It was
So
huge.
for example, you've got that stack of paper rolled there, plus all of this that came in 6 copies for the application. However, oh, I'm even missing a piece here. There's another piece somewhere on the desk. The majority of this is all engineering review. Lou needs this, you need a copy for the file, but we don't need 6 copies of it. You don't need one for the fire chief, you don't need one for the police chief. So we're asking applicants to give us a lot of paper.
Change, is that just a vote during a meeting, or is that a public hearing? Or is
It's
that
a hearing, so it'd be something to, because it's a regulation change,
Yeah,
it's your submission requirement. So, what I would recommend, because it's minor, I would recommend drafting it up and hold it. If you've got other things, bundle it with any other minor amendments that you have. But it's something that, as we talk to applicants, we can say, yes, give us 6 sets of plan sets. Yes, give us 6 copies of the of the front matter application, but don't give us 6 sets of your state permits.
And we say public hearing, it's a public hearing's enough to change that. It doesn't have to go to town meeting or the ballot or
No,
anything at all.
Correct,
Town
because
meeting.
it's
So
Just,
one to the draft for August 5th, and we'll throw it to the first public hearing we have.
not for August 5th.
Is that too much to do?
Yeah. And I'm also on vacation for a week in between, so.
So the first meeting in September?
Yeah, that would be, that would,
And the home occupation as well, now that we can put everything on the site, we don't need the applicant to make 6 copies of it.
okay.
Email it in triplicate, that'll be fine.
Any other
Yeah.
business for this evening, or? I thought you had something on there before, if we had time to get to do it, but
The ordinance, the impact fee ordinance was it. So if you want to go through it, we can go through it. That's your call.
Zach and I mean, we're gonna have a busy meeting August 5th.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, we can just go through what the comments are, digest, and then make some decisions on August 5th.
Yeah,
Or some of them, if they're just quick and easy.
yeah, just do it now and get it done.
Okay. Okay. We'll just go through quickly.
So is that under,
It is, yeah, it's posted, sorry, I can tell you which file it is. Long and jumbly. Let's see, draft impact fees, ZO 7/9/2014, clean, bunch of people comments.
Close the door?
It is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th item down.
that's easier.
When I leave.
Fifth one down. Yep.
Close the door when I leave. Right? Oh, okay.
I'll just hit where there were comments.
Yep.
And just walk through where there were comments. On page 2, section 1301.05, definition of new development. Town council commented that items A and B seemed redundant.
The only difference is B does a net increase in number of dwelling units, but that's kind of inferred in A too.
Right,
That doesn't say it specifically, but it kind of does.
right. We could easily work to kind of massage the two to make sure we cover all the bases and then one
I would
bullet
say
point.
merge them into one, because they do overlap a lot.
Yeah.
The board agrees, or?
Scroll down.
Do you want a hard copy? Okay.
Trying to find where it was.
It's a fifth one down. Z something. Is everyone okay with combining those, massaging A and B into
Yeah.
one?
Yes.
Just to be cleaner.
All right.
Yeah, if we could wordsmith that to make it, to
Okay.
hold the intent, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
flows better.
Yeah, and also remove any redundancy between the two, which is fine. I'm gonna skip over any of the track changes. All of the track changes that are in here, yellow highlighted, they're from council. Not, I don't think any of them were substantial. I think they were just cleaning things up, clarifying. If something's substantial, I'll pause. But otherwise, I'm just gonna kind of keep moving forward. Most of it was just making sure that we use the right words or terms. Cleaned up a couple spots. So moving on to more comments of substance, page 5. Section 1302.06. Paragraph A, under appeals. So this was something that appeals as structure were going to the planning board. We switched it to the selectmen, because the planning board doesn't normally hear appeals, and appeals might go to the selectmen or the zoning board more traditionally. Council replied, why are appeals going to the selectmen when the selectmen are making the decisions? So they're essentially hearing an appeal of a decision they made, which I think council in this case is saying is not normal. He said, why are they not just going directly to court, which we could do, or we could put it back to the planning board, or we could put it to the zoning board. I mean, by going back to the planning board, you're leaving it as is, with no change. And then if the applicant doesn't like the planning board decides, then they go to the courts for the appeal.
The zoning board hears appeals anyway. The zoning board hears the appeals anyway, different types of appeals.
Different types of appeals, right.
Can't you just have some language in here that they're entitled, an appeal, that any aggrieved party may appeal based upon current state laws and statutes or whatever?
And that would be to the courts, unless you authorize something
Just
else.
leave it as that. Plain and simple.
Then you go to court as a first step with.
Yeah.
You want to give someone at least a hearing,
So I guess the planning board is probably the best place to keep it.
So leave it back at the planning. Yeah, that's what I think. Right. But at least gives you, because without explicitly stating what the appeal structure is, it automatically defaults to going to court. Which eliminates the opportunity for the applicant to appeal it in a more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Friendly way.
Cordial, friendly, yeah,
Not expensive.
amenable.
Less adversarial.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. I'm thinking it starts with an A. Thank you. So it gives you exactly that, a less adversarial way to potentially resolve a situation without legal fees, and the town doesn't end up in court. So
So are we changing any of the word at all? Did we change anything else besides switching out planning board with board of selectmen?
no, so we
just
just
go
go
back
back.
to the
We
original.
just go back to the original planning board. Okay, next comment, was page 6. At the bottom of the page, section 1304.02, establishment, review, and change of assessment schedules. Any particular reason that the BOS established the fees as opposed to the planning board, because that's what you do right now. Your current procedure is the planning board proposes it, makes a recommendation to the selectmen adopt the fee schedule. That's what the current practice is in Litchfield, and that's what you had retained in this language.
You have two boards looking at it.
Right. In other communities, though, I will tell you the planning board is generally the one, they look at the schedule, they review the schedule, they hold a hearing on the schedule, they adopt the schedule. Is what a lot of other communities do. The fact that Litchfield sends it to the selectmen for that final stamp of approval is, it's not unique, but it's less common.
Is there any negative? There's no negative reason why. There's no other set of eyes.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, part of it's that another set of eyes. Also, you've got the planning, you've got the school department and any other departments that are looking to utilize the impact fees. They have to go to the board of selectmen and discuss it with them and get their approval before expending that fee. So it gets the selectmen invested in that discussion process early on. So it makes it a kind of a joint board decision-making process.
But I think we're fine leaving it the way it is.
Yep, I would say. Okay. Next comment, page 7. This is also on section 1304.02, this time paragraph D. This comment came from Mr. Mayberry, who noted that this paragraph didn't seem to fit within the section. He's totally right. He also noted that under RSA 674.39, the applicable assessment is assigned. Okay, so this is again getting at the vesting. Sorry, just to remind, just that vesting process. So thinking about it, so when the applicant comes in, you stamp it with the fee schedule at the time of approval. That fee schedule, they are locked in for 5 years. After those 5 years, though, if they haven't come in and built their house, they've lost their vesting, essentially, is what happens. And so whatever the fee schedule is in effect at that time would then be the applicable fee schedule, unless you chose to say, nope, we're going to lock it in forever. And so that was the other side of things. And so his comment was the only reason to retain that paragraph was that it's going to be locked in forever. If that is the case, then this isn't the right place in the ordinance for it. It needed to get moved to, I forget where. The previous section. No, not that previous section, sorry. 130203. Yes. So that was a item to decide.
So if we strike it as it is, then the 5-year period is in play, and if we keep it, that means it's forever locked in.
Right.
At 5 years, what we have currently. Correct.
Right, I'm just trying to see if we had any other language where we kept, because there was language where we were, and I want to see if this is just that paragraph that we had that locked it in perpetuity, and it just, in the shuffling, got orphaned, or if we have it somewhere else. So.
While you're looking at that, is there anyone on the board or discussion whether 5 years should be kept or if it should be locked in forever?
I thought when we were drafting this, the intention was that we wouldn't shock an existing plan with a new set of impact fees once the ordinance becomes adopted. So this was just a way of protecting existing approved plans. I could be wrong.
By having a 5, because right now it's a 5-year lock.
Is it? I didn't see that. I don't recall.
No, we're locked in. Right now, we're locked in perpetuity. Correct.
don't see the harm in going to a 5-year sunset on it. That way, if a property isn't developed within that 5-year period, a new set of fees can be assessed to better reflect the reality on the ground at that time.
Yeah. The lower fee too.
Could be. But whatever that fee will be at the date it's assessed will be reflecting what the conditions are.
Which is more fair.
Yep.
All right, so I think we want to have the 5-year period put in, so that has to be re-wordsmithed or covered in 130203.
So what was the bigger picture policy thing? Yes, 5-year vesting?
Yes.
So the yes on the vesting for 5 years only, and then pay what, so if it's, so I was just doing a little if-then statements here in the margin. So if you wanted to keep it in perpetuity, then we would take this paragraph D and move it to the correct location. If you want to say, no, you're vested for the 5 years, and then after 5 years, you pay the applicable fee, then you just delete the paragraph and do nothing else, because that is what current statute dictates. It's also upheld through case law, through a case from Litchfield. So
Current statute statewide.
correct.
Okay, so we automatically go under the state statute because we don't say
Yes.
it differently here. So-
Exactly.
Okay. So by saying nothing, we're saying 5 years.
Correct.
What about the case law from our case?
State law was amended to codify case law from the Litchfield case.
So you can do the 5 years
Yes.
it's vested?
But it's from date of approval stamped and moving forward.
Recorded?
Um,
Or approved?
That's a good question. I would have to double check vesting whether it's,
I think it
Oh,
just
I think it's
said
approved.
approval, yeah. Okay.
so they'd be locked in for 5 years. And the only case would be if they hadn't, so like take a subdivision. What happens is you get your subdivision application, they print on the plan set what the fees are, and then they go and sell the lots. The impact fee is not assessed at the time that the lot is sold. The impact fee is assessed at the time the house is built. So when each individual lot owner comes in and says, I'm building my house, and pulls their permits from Kevin, they then are assessed their impact fee that they pay at that time based on the actual size of what they're constructing. And then to be given their certificate of occupancy, Kevin has to double check and make sure that they have also paid their impact fees.
So it's locked in when they apply? It's locked in when they apply, because with the 5-year period, it's 4
The
months.
the rate is locked in when they get approved.
Right,
And then depending on what square footage they build, it depends on what they pay.
right.
No, but the rate, well, the rate says 4 years, 10 months, the rate's put in when you apply, but when you finish the house and close, it gets to occupancy, the 5 years has passed, so it may be a different amount. Are they locking in when they get the application?
Yeah, they'd be locked in when they get the application.
Yes,
Application, that's your number.
yeah.
And the rate is set when the plan is approved, be it site plan or subdivision plan.
Or if
And
it's
then
been
when
5
the lot
years.
when the lot is built, yeah, whatever period of time passes before that building permit, and if I'm missing something here, please
No.
jump in. When that building permit is issued, that's when the fee is assessed.
Right.
And before the certificate of occupancy can be issued at completion of build, that fee has to be paid.
Oh, just saying with
But
the
you've got a
5-year
lag
window
time.
here,
Yeah.
because something like Moose Hollow, we had one empty lot for the last 12 years or 10 years, something like that's been there for.
Yeah, now that begs a question so now it's forever, the notes on the plan, like Moose Hollow, that would be forever. Anything coming in new, changing into 5 years,
So we put something in this that
It'd be only anything
Yeah.
after that fact, after that date.
after the
After
date,
this
yeah.
ordinance
accepted.
is
Okay.
passed.
Right.
Anything that's there now stays forever.
Right. Then we'll have to have the date in there, anything after
Yep.
this
maybe we should add it somewhere in this,
passes.
in the 5-year as the effective date of it.
Okay.
Because you're going to
Down the road,
go,
a future planning board can review it and say, what were they thinking, taking a date in there?
Moose Hollow's still gonna have one lot open 20 years from now. We still have the road done. place that wherever you
Yep.
think is logical.
So you're going to go with the 5-year
As in-
vesting as opposed to forever on the,
Yeah,
rate on the plan?
effective whatever date it passes at public hearing.
Assuming it passes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
When it passes, but we do have some work to do. Public awareness.
Okay. Page 8 is the last 3 comments. Paragraph C up at the top, section 1305.02, use of funds. This is Mr. Mayberry commenting. This used to be, where it says should, it used to be shall. The concern was that you're not always going to get the CIP to include this language, but the board wanted to at least say that, listen, we really would like this to be included. We know you may or may not do it, but we're going on record as saying we'd like to see it there. So, in what you were directing the CIP committee to do here is to make sure that they include a methodology for assigning funds. So
If they don't, we have no recourse because we haven't mandated it. We've only suggested it.
Right. Right. So that was Mr. Mayberry's. It's not mandatory. By saying should, it's not mandatory. You have no teeth to hold them to it. On the other hand, when he's seen it as a shall, it doesn't always happen anyways. So rather benign. Paragraph D below it, the word, he flagged the word users. He said users of impact fee, this requires users of impact fees to provide an accounting of how funds were expended. I was not sure the intent here. The only users of the fee are the town and the school district. It is up to the town to account for and the use of funds and how they were applied. My understanding, this is existing language that's been retained and carried forward. My understanding of this is that it's just ensuring that once the selectmen have authorized the expenditure of those funds, that the person or the department that has utilized those funds reports back to the selectmen on how they were spent. Just making sure that there's that accountability. That was my understanding of what the intent was here. So I think for him it was just a question of why it was there, or what the intent was.
That's my understanding too.
Right.
The should or shall one there.
Correct, yes.
Should we really want, regardless of whether they're doing it or not, it's not the point, but
Right.
should we not require that, that buttons it down as saying, if there's any question, there's the methodology, there's the way we do it, it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's self-defeatist just to acknowledge that it's should, because it's unlikely that they will.
Somebody said will, what would happen?
No.
You say shall, will it happen?
Oh, will.
Will means that we'll do it sometime in the future, not right now.
Must?
No, shall is the word.
Is the word?
It's the legal definition, where they absolutely will do it. Now, whether they do it is a different matter, but shall be used.
Shall means what?
But if we put shall in there and hold them to it, and they don't do it, we then have some recourse. They're in violation of ordinance. And then we can take them to court and make a whole big mess of things.
It's should in there, they can do as they please.
You leave it up to them whether they're gonna do it or not. This tells them they don't have to do anything.
Right. It offers a general direction we'd like them to travel in,
Right.
But they don't have to.
Right.
We've got to trust that.
Unless someone pressed them and.
Yeah, we've got to trust that the folks on the CIP panel are going to be working in the best interest with what we've infrastructure.
All codes, should is you can, shall is the law.
Right.
That's in any That's in electric codes, plumbing
Right,
codes.
shall, you
any
shall.
stuff, Yep. Anything is shall.
No shoulds. Otherwise,
Put
what's
it back to
the
shall.
Any of us want to change it to shall?
Let's put it back to shall.
1 shall, 2 shalls, 3 shalls, 4 shalls, 5 shalls. All right.
Now, if they were planning for
All right.
that,
Okay. And the refund of fees paid, there's no discussion. This is just Mr. Mayberry again saying that he believes they should go back to the owner lot of record.
So we go to our state rep and tell them to change the law.
That would be the only way, I think, to make sure that, yeah.
Yeah.
But until that statutory change occurs, I think you're bound with sticking with guidance from council, whether we think it's ethically correct or not.
I think it's council's way of perpetuating their employability. Someone's gonna sue us over this, council's gonna have a whole bunch of money coming at them to defend us. I know. It just drives me crazy.
And then the state law changes.
Is that a shall?
Oh, it's a might.
All
More of a
right.
maybe.
So, that was it for comments at this point. So I just, in terms of the track changes from council, if you see anything that jumps out at you, just let me know, but otherwise, I'm just gonna take council's recommendations. They all looked very reasonable.
Legal, they all look legal.
They all really helped button up some of the terminology, make it consistent and simple, straightforward. Even fix some of my grammar.
All right. Anything else this evening? Any motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes 5-0-0. Our next meeting will be August 5th at 7 p.m. Have a good evening.